Hello, welcome to the EUSDS History Spotlight, and today it's all about the Charleston. So let's look at where it came from. Like many popular jazz dances in the 20th century, Charleston has its roots in the mixing of West African dance cultures on slave plantations, and the African American folk dances that emerged from this often featured things like bent knees, rhythmic stepping, and movements inspired by the natural world and animals, and these are all things that we'd later see in Charleston itself. Through tent shows, vaudeville, minstrel shows, which we should remember were often quite mocking of African Americans and featured blackface, these features of African American dance began to be popularised alongside the early jazz music that these shows would feature. One of the most famous performers in these travelling shows was a man named Master Juba. He was an African American dancer who travelled with an all-white minstrel group, and he was known for outperforming his competitors in what were called challenge dances. His name was probably a reference to a dance known as the patting juba, which involved stomping feet, patting the arms, legs and chest in time to the rhythm, and again these are sometimes seen as early incarnations of Charleston moves. As African Americans in the early 20th century moved from the south to the north of the USA, they brought with them their existing dance cultures, and these began to develop alongside the evolution of jazz music. Early 1900s saw dances like the turkey trot and bear hug become popular in dance halls to fast ragtime music, for example. These, alongside things like black bottom and tap, are seen as influencing the development of Charleston, and probably around about this time we start to see an early version of the dance being performed on stage. The Charleston that we would recognise really exploded into popularity with the success of the 1923 musical Running Wild. Unusually for the time, this Broadway show featured an African American cast. The musical also featured that Charleston song, insert copyright music, which was called The Charleston, and the composer claimed that the name came from the fact that he based it off of rhythms he heard from dock workers from Charleston, South Carolina. The dance featured in the show was copied in other productions and, more importantly, dance halls. There's no definitive reason why the dance took off as it did, sweeping across America and Europe, but some common reasons given are the popularity of jazz, it was relatively simple, it could be danced as a couple or solo so anyone could enjoy it, and this idea that it sort of fit this carefree nature of the roaring 20s as countries recovered from World War I and a new generation came of age in a time of optimism, although that last point tends to refer mostly to white, middle and upper class folk. That being said, Charleston did come to be associated with the youth culture of the day, and like all good dance crazes, incited a good dose of moral panic. It was associated with short skirts and independence amongst young women, and add to this the dance's wild, fast movements and a general concern amongst white people about the roots of jazz music, and some dance halls looked to prohibit Charleston from its floor. We see a lot of these fears reflected in the flapper girl image, made popular by film, books, fashion houses and art. Charleston also had its standout superstars, and I want to tell you about one of my favourites. The American-French dancer Josephine Baker rose to fame in the music halls and clubs of Paris in the early 1920s. She was often known for provocative and risque shows, such as the 1925 Danse Sauvage, in which she famously wore a skirt made of artificial bananas. The symbolism of this is quite widely debated, and it's really worth a look into if you're interested. So as well as touring Europe as a dancer, Baker featured in films such as the 1927 silent film Siren of the Tropics, and she was one of the first black women to do so. Just like the steps from Running Wild were copied in dance halls, Baker's signature styling, including things like crossing the hands over your knees as you danced, were adopted as part of Charleston's social dancing. Baker was also known for, amongst many other things, featuring her pet cheetah on stage, a singing career, working in intelligence for the French Resistance, supporting the US Civil Rights Movement, having 4 husbands, having several relationships with women, including blues singer Clara Smith, and adopting 12 children. And if none of that's made you interested in her, I don't know what will. So Charleston's popularity began to fade in the late 1920s. The steps evolved into new dances which fit with the evolutions in swing music. Amongst these, of course, was the Lindy Hop, which had its own form of Charleston, using kicks rather than steps. Since then, the original 1920s Charleston has been revived, in part by swing dancers, but also due to this continuing obsession and popularity of the 1920s as a decade, in part thanks to media such as The Great Gatsby. And perhaps just a general over-glamorisation of the era. However, the fact that it's a dance that you can enjoy solo also means it's pretty perfect for 2020. Thanks for watching the EUSDS History Spotlight, and I hope you enjoyed dancing Charleston as much as I've enjoyed rambling about it.